but we have to get into it. So, we discussed a whole long discussion here how the world, the Havas Ha'elamis, is based and its source and it's provided for by a principle called Yichud Ayin V'Yesh, union, or a zivug is called a zivug, a union between Ayin and Yesh. As an example, the Yichud of Chochmah and Bina. And we explained this morning, this is what we started this morning essentially. Ayin is representative of the true presence, the true reality. And we always quote the Rambam says, the first principle is in Chochmah, and the same is true regarding the Mashiach of the world. What gives the world any kind of a presence is that there is a first being. First being and world are worlds apart. Best way you can express it. First being has no beginning and has no cause. And first being, as we mentioned many times, first being does not pose a question, where you're coming from. Because its presence is beyond that type of a presence that requires a justification and explanation where you're coming from. World is entirely a creation. And this is, but in the world, the creation aspect of the world is that it provided kalim, it provided some kind of a vessel, some kind of defining element for the first being. Not the first being per se, but something that is nimshach from the first being, and it's called an of Ayin. And this is the Ayin. In other words, and I'm going to go any further because this is going to be too involved. But essentially, this provides, the Ayin provides for the Yesh an element of, yes indeed, it has to be there. There's a truth behind it. And that's the Yichud Ayin V'Yesh. As we said this morning, if you had the Yesh alone, without the sense of the Ayin, then it is totally an imagination. There's no reality to this Yesh. Imagine you set up this table and all of these, the entire setup, and you're in the middle of the desert. You didn't have the surrounding reality. You would say this is completely out of whack. It's out of place. There's no reality to it. Let's imagine we are somewhere, we've been nowhere. Just to illustrate the principle. And thus, Chochmah Bina, the Yichud Chochmah Bina, this is the mokir for his Havas Ha'elamis Mi'ayin L'Yesh.
Which line are we on? Which line are we on?
Oh, we're just on the second line from the top. Ach kol zeh, man vav. Ach kol zeh hu rak michitzeni ze Chochmah Bina. However, this the effect of the Yichud Chochma Bina, Yichud Ayin, and that provides a Yichud Ayin v'yesh, and therefore it provides a mokili, Shabbos or elements, but this is only Mechitzonis and Chochma Bina. It's from the Chitzonis Chochma Bina. This Inyan Chitzonis and Pnimius, as much as we discuss it, remains, it's a kind of an elusive Inyan. The reason it's an elusive Inyan to us is because we have a hard time distinguishing it. Not a hard time distinguish it between Pnimis and Chitzonis, and we focus on it. But we are so accustomed to living on a Chitzonistic level and to identify things in a Chitzonistic level, we don't see what's so Chitzonis about it. This is the reality. So we'll try to follow the words, and as the Rebbe explains. Was meint es Mechitzonis the Chochma Bina? Because the reason we said this Chitzonis is because that which is Nimshach, that which is involved in this union, is Ha'ora Levat. Is only Ha'ora of Chochma and Bina. A ha'ora is what's called a reflection. It's not the real thing. And I will just mention the principle that we have pointed out in terms of ha'ora, that we can directly identify with, and that is the light. Like everybody, that light is defined as some kind of an energy emanating from the sun, traveling and hitting an object and making the object visible. This is called the ha'or. Why is it the ha'or? Because the whole presence of this light is only due to the fact that it has some kind of effect. It doesn't have a presence of its own. Because it has an effect. It illuminates it, makes it possible to see things in the darkness. Therefore it's a presence. So that's the functionality of light. That's not light in essence. This is called the ha'or. And the similar union is in Chochma Bina. When you have a union Chochma Bina, this is a union in ha'ora of Chochma, ha'ora of Bina. This is the principle, what we call zivug ruchni, a spiritual joining. A spiritual joining means the joining at the spirit level. Which is, as an example, hashpa'as haseichel. The hashpa'ah, the provision, the teaching, the bestowing of seichel. So when hashpa'as haseichel, when the Rav is mashpia seichel to the Talmid, or mashpia is mashpia seichel to the Makaber, she'ein hashpa'ah atzmiyus mimhus haseichel. this we will repeat again, but hopefully we will get a grasp on it. The hashpoas haseichel is not a hashpoa atzmius mimahuz haseichel, from the mahuz of the seichel. What does that mean? Hashpoa atzmius mahuz haseichel. In the seichel harav, there are two distinct levels. There is the seichel, the way the Rav understands the seichel for himself. And the seichel how the Rav is mashpia seichel to the Talmud. Let's understand. The Rav, he has a seichel to himself, without anybody mashpia teaching it to him. Where does he get the seichel from? What makes him understand the seichel? So we have the moshel for this, that we described many times. If someone is up on a mountain and he sees the whole panorama, and he then is describing to someone down the mountain what he sees. Or better still, probably more correctly in terms of hashpos haseichel, he climbs down the mountain and tells him the impression that he had when he was up on the mountain. He knows it because he actually experienced it. He was up there. Whatever he transmits in relating it is more than a memory. He relates what he has experienced, but he relates it on the chitzonic level. The impression that he can transmit, not the actual experience. That he cannot relate. What is the difference between the impression and the actual experience? The actual experience is there because he is a living seichel. He is alive. He actually experienced it, so to speak, on his own skin. Seichel, as we always say, and you have to remember, seichel is is the highest koyach that we experience from the nefesh. It was usurped, it was completely misused, misinterpreted, that seichel is just to solve a little puzzle. Seichel is that which brings the reality to us. The reality of the world and the reality of the creator of the world. And it is rooted in the reality of the nefesh. So that the Rav has this seichel as it emanates and it is drawn from his nefesh. There is a mahus, there is that which makes it possible for him to understand. This is the seichel of Rav. What he transmits to the Talmud is but a ha'or of that. Of that, it's the story behind it, that what he knows. This is the ha'or haseichel, tzenis haseichel. I will use a demonstration that we're very familiar with because we mentioned it all the time. 1 and 1 is 2. And we always say 1 and 1 is 2. Internally to the Rav, it is 2. The way it is being presented and shown, it's 2. You can see, look, count them over. When they say count them over, you're not talking about 2, you're talking about 2 ones. This is the chitzonius of the seichel. It's not the real seichel. The fact that it's 2, he cannot really bestow upon the Talmud. He cannot give him that understanding. He can't even explain what that means. The Talmud, because he has seichel, and if he listens to what the Rabbi is teaching him, he will dig down into his own koyachas and nefesh, and he will get the sense of what it means, what two means. But what is he able to teach him? Only two words. This is the Chassidus of the seichel. And this is not that seichel, hashpor seichel is any hashpor atzmis memhuz haseichel. From the mehuz, from the very presence and existence of the seichel kanal. Chmoy came, likewise, ma shenim shech mechochmo bino. Let's say that his havas malochim v'nivroyim, that which comes forth, which is drawn from the chochma bino, for the sake and for the purpose of bringing forth malochim and nivroim, malochim and creations, ein zeh mibchinas ha'atzmi shalahem, it is not from the aspect of the atzmiyus of the chochma bina, which means atzmiyus means, as we said, what makes the chochma know what it knows? What makes the bina know what it knows? This is the atzmiyus. Kiyim ha'or lavad, only the factual fact that he knows this and he knows that. This is what the ha'or lavad, and therefore the joining between chochma and bina is an ha'or level. We gave an illustration before of having this set up in an open field, in a desert. What makes us, thank you, what makes us aware that we are in an enclosed environment? And therefore everything makes sense. And this is just, so to speak, a derivative the essential derivative of this enclosed environment. It is the fact that we are in the environment. This is what makes us aware of it. The chokhmah element of the person that actually relates to this and is aware of it. This is what's called the essential element of the Chacham. Nobody has to tell me, no, you're in the environment. And like I mentioned, Havdil, an animal does not appreciate that reality that is behind it. In that class, there are cheers. Doesn't appreciate it. To a human being, it's very significant. Like we always say, Odom Shein Beis, any Odom, the bias is a very important aspect of human value or human status. But the animal doesn't have that, because the animal doesn't have seichel. At best, he feels more comfortable if there is no rain, if there's no wind or something like that, if he has that awareness. But the essential in that he is within an enclosure that gives him a certain correlationship to everything that's in the room that he doesn't have at all. You walk in the street, and the dog is across the street, he begins to bark at you. Hey you! Yeah. Doesn't know the difference. So that which is nimshach from the chokhmah bina, from the seichel, in hashporas ha-seichel, is only the chitzenius. And therefore the same thing is in the yichud chokhmah bina, that the nimshach L'tzedek his havas malachim v'nivroim. I'm going to kind of interrupt for a moment, just to give us an overall view. The hishavus that comes in Malachim and Nivroim from Chochma Ubina is hishavus a ha'ora levad. Because as we said in the previous page, the real hishavus bepoyel is not from Chochma Ubina, but it is from Malchus. That's a real hishavus. That's a real creation, as we should see. But now we're going back and explaining what kind of hishavus is it from Chochma Ubina. Okay. We are 5 lines from the top at the end of the line. Hagam she'nizboi liyil. Although we explained earlier, the moshel, when we talked about the moshel of Hashpoas HaSeichel, so there we explained the Hashpoas HaSeichel, that from the experience of Hashpoas HaSeichel, the Yeseh Ha'or Levad, being that it is merely a ha'ora, einem is have mizeh mehu seichel etzel hamkaber. That does not provide and create by the makabel the essence of seichel. If the makabel ultimately gets to the essence of seichel, is because he had the essence of seichel on his own, but not the hashpoas seichel from the Rav. That does not create it. At best, as we mentioned lately a lot, Hashpoas HaSeichel, as he is digging and trying to understand, there is what's called a trigger, something that touches him on the depth, on the point that his own Seichel becomes revealed. And we said that Hashpoas that the trigger just a second. The trigger could be, as we said, the Gemara says that that a child eating certain foods, what we discussed today, grain food, and so we explained the whole phenomenon behind it. His seichel opens up. It touches him to the point where, at a very simple level, he can identify father and mother. But with his seichel, it gives him a certain reality of father and mother. Not the father gives him food or reprimands him, or the mother gives him a bati. Some kind of a reality, sense of reality. That's seichel. But that is because he has his own seichel. It doesn't create seichel. Because he has a full nefesh, and the nefesh provides him with all the 10 koiches, because what nefesh is. Therefore, when it is being shown to him, or some other experience that triggers it, it touches him, and eventually it allows him to fully reveal it and develop it. So therefore, how is it compared to what we're saying here? There we said that in the mashal of Hashpoas HaSeichel, there is not a created a Mehus Seichel by the Makabel. If he has it, it's because he has it in his own. But here, Harei, here meaning we're talking about the Nimshal in the creation of Malachim and Nivroim and so forth. Harei mehayichud the Chochma Ubina. So here we see that as a result of this yichud Chochma Ubina, of this union between Chochma Ubina, and from this union there is formed a hashpor, Nizhavu mehuz hanivroim. Came to be, are created, the very presence of the Nivroim, im moichin umidas, along such Nivroim that have the element of moichin umidas. And these moichin umidas that the Nivroim have, they are not pre-existent in Nivroim. They are created along with the Nivroim themselves. So therefore, there is a full-fledged creation here that is so real and so complete that it has even from moichin umidas. This will be further elaborate here. Just want to point out that when we want to describe the fact that there is a mohus hanivroim, there's a true presence of Nivroim, we are mentioning the Ayin that they have moichin umidas. What is so real about the fact that they have moichin umidas, and that therefore makes it that they're real, complete creatures? Again, this will develop as we go. I just want to point out what is really so significant about moichin umidas. The principle of moichin umidas, we always say seichel is exclusively a human property. If animals exhibit any kind of smarts, this is not seichel. We call it, what's the word?
Cunning. Instinct? Instinct?
Instinct. Cunning is also a kind of seichel. It's not seichel, it's instinct. What is in fact the difference between this instinct and seichel?
Seichel has undeveloped instinct.
Excuse me. What is about the difference between seichel and instinct? And this, as we will understand it, this will give us a clearer distinction between seichel, the real seichel, seichel haTorah, and seichel chitzoni, the scientific seichel. In instinct by animals, there are certain interesting phenomena that people are mispoiled. Look at this, real smarts. I was once standing in 770 over there in the courtroom, and some bochim, mature bochim, at Srolik, when they were spoiled, they were talking bochim were constantly are we for real? Animals are the same? And they were describing a situation that a certain animal was standing by a lake or by a river and was throwing pieces of food into the water. And the fish would come up to catch the food, and then he would go and catch a fish. It was fishing. Look at this. This is real human seichel. And they were so spoiled they couldn't get out of it. You know, it's a very important thing. If we begin to lose a clear demarcation line between the human and the animal, then we are prone to become an animal. God forbid. But there is that demarcation line is so broad and profound, except we don't fully understand what a human being is, what human seichel is. But this is all instinct. What is that? It's instinct. And how is it different from seichel or adam? So as I point out, a very simple illustration, and that gives us an opening to understand it in a broader way. If a dog comes to your stoop and you hit it, and the dog runs away, so the dog will know next time not to go onto the stoop. Or, at the minimum, when you come out, run away. It reminds me of a thing that my grandfather, my wife's grandfather, he lived here during the 30s, during the Depression. In Frum at Eden, he wanted to be Frum, keep Shabbos, and Hamei Panosi, he had all kinds of independent little business. He was a peddler. There was nothing under the sun that he couldn't do. Whoever gave him his way, he did. And he was a peddler. He had this little cart, and he would go around peddling whatever. Belts, ties, shoelaces. He paid his way. And he used to go through Goyish streets. And anti-Semitism over there, at that time, it was in vogue. In other words, it was not to be ashamed of anti-Semitism. Hey, Jew, go dog, catch it to this Jew. Like in the old country. And he became roughened up on this. He knew he had to go through this. So he would stand there and the dog would come at him. And these are not little puppies, a dog. He would wait for the dog. As soon as the dog was close enough, he would give it a kick. Straight into its border, into its chin. And the dog would run away. And this was a painful kick. He says after a while, all the dogs knew when he comes to the street, they go hiding. He had the street all to himself. So the dog is smart. Look at this. He knows this is a dangerous thing and he runs away. Is this seichel? Or is this instinct? What would it be? How would you describe it as seichel? How would you describe it as instinct? The instinct, anything that a person learns on his own skin is instinct. The Chassidus says that an animal doesn't have seichel. If an animal does not run away from fire, that's a sick animal. Even in the animal world, it's a sick animal. I told him Shaita. He lacks the instinct, the normal animalist instinct. Not that and what the difference? He knows that fire hurts because fire hurts. A human being goes away from fire, he knows because he knows what fire is. Not because it hurts, because it's destructive. You don't go to fire. And a human being knows about fire much more than the fact that you don't go to fire. Fire is a very, very significant thing, and a very important Indian, and it belongs where it belongs. It identifies fire for its own real value, not for how it affects him. This is the principle of Seichel. This is why Seichel is so significant. As we shall say, Seichel is what gives us a sense of the reality of the world. What does reality of the world have to do with us? We don't eat the reality, we eat that which is edible. How do we relate to reality? This is Pshat Seichel. And this is why a human being has the capacity, and that's what that's his duty in the world, to act according to the truth, not according to the way to that which is expedient. To the extent that he is able to act in a manner that is contrary to experience. He can take his own son. Of course, this is so to speak, the epitome of Seichel. Adam Avram was Chochmah, but never take his own son that he waited for 99 years, and put him on the altar. Because there is a reality that's completely beyond the experiential reality. This is Seichel. Of course, the example I'm giving is a Seichel which is not accessible by forget about the average, accessible even by elite, generally speaking. But nevertheless, it's still Seichel. It's still reality. Someone was discussing what was so significant, what was represented in the Haggadah. Maybe should tell Avram to take his son and put him on the altar. It didn't make any sense whatsoever from the entire history of Avram's life. It didn't make any sense. From what Avram knew, but maybe the whole thing didn't make any sense. But nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe points out the Rebbe himself told him to take his son to the altar. So what's the big nisayon? How can you withstand that? Where do you see Avram's greatness? In the fact that Avram told him, and he goes and puts him on the altar. Literally puts him on the altar and stretches out his hand to take the knife. Where do you see Avram's greatness in this? Not in the fact that he obeyed. There's no question about obeying. In the fact that it was so clear to him that the Rebbe told him to put his son on the altar. He didn't doubt his own perception. Avram, you're crazy. You imagine it. This never happened. No. It was so real that he went again and he took the son on the altar. In other words, this godly presence, which is totally beyond the world, there's nothing worldly about it. There's no tangible experience that you say from this godly presence. It was so real to him because of this insight, this part of Seichel, that he had no doubt. The Rebbe told him to put his son on the altar, and he went and put his son on the altar. We go every day in the morning. This is on our level. Really on our level. But this is something which we have the capacity to do. We get up in the morning and we run to the mikveh and put on tefillin. And you stand on the side, what are these guys doing? What is guys doing? You put on the little straps of leather on the arm, and it's a whole big deal. What is that? In order for this to be real, this is exclusive, this is a human capacity to understand and to relate to the truth of Seichel. Call it Amunah, this is not he said Amunah is the pinnacle of Seichel. Even to the extent that he said by Har Sinai, Yidden said Nasa v'nishma. Was that stupidity, or what is this? The epitome of Seichel, the epitome of wisdom. Because they recognized in their Seichel the reality, they got the reality. As the Rambam says, this will bring it back home, the first principle of human thought, of human wisdom, is to know that there's a first being. And from this first being, everything emanates. If we perceive things to be cause and effect, we don't have human wisdom. We don't have human wisdom. This is instinct. We can experience it on our own skin. As I said, this exposes the entire field of physical wisdom, physical science. Now they say, hey, this is so true, you can even duplicate it. It's all within the physical reality. Well, it's all in instinctive knowledge. This is not human seichel. This is not based on human perception of reality. As a matter of fact, it completely discounts the principle of life, of neshama. Because it cannot relate to it. This is instinct cannot understand what life is. Doesn't touch me. To know that there's a first being without any research and investigation. To know it because that's the reality that I know. Prior to Chochmah. That's human seichel. That's what the human being is. This is exclusively human. It's exclusively the property of the human being. And it doesn't exist in any animal, no matter how advanced. There's an interesting phenomenon, though. On the instinctive level, on the animal level, the Gemara says, Ein chaya roa sheletes ba'odom elim ken nid melok yibheim. Which means, the Rebbe created all the animals, and then he created the human being. And as we stress all the time, the human being was created in a totally different method than the other animals. And the human being, without having to go through all the steps, everybody heard it, the human being, as a result of this method of creation, represents primarily the godly element in him rather than the physical worldly element in him. This is what the human being stands for. This is the level at which he thinks. Like he always says, he stands up erect, which doesn't make any, that's not a worldly phenomenon. To begin with, his whole stature is a godly stature. It's called the Tzelem Elokim. And the Chayra stands in awe of this.
Chayra, evil animal?
Yeah. A wild beast.
Wow.
A Chayra, ein Chayra sheletes b'odom. Ellen can need not Lord keep him. If a person, Achmon Islam, this stooped down to think and to act and live like an animal. In other words, he does not really sense his human quality. Then Chayroi can be shoylet him. That's what the Gemara says. Like we say that the Nil was thrown into the groove of Geva Rois, into the pit of lions, and the lions were standing around him in awe. It's a huge miracle. But the miracle is the miracle of creation. Just as testing to one thing, that there's a godly element that the Nil represented, and the animal would never, not dare, come to harm him. And even today, even in normal human experience, regardless of the situation, so on, still dogs know a certain deference for human beings. It's a different. It's not one of ours, one of us. So even though they don't know to identify, they don't have seichel, but they say this is something different. This is what the Rebbe says. The Yichud Chochmah Bina created a creature that has moichin and midas. Moichin and midas means that he has the capacity, his view of reality is not based on his own experience, which is part of the world, which is not a real creation. He has moichin and midas means that he is a real presence. Step back a little bit, and we will bring this out clearly. Hopefully everybody already sees it. How do we know, what makes us aware that there is a Motzui Risha in Mamzik Al-Hinz? There's a first being. And then Me'amit is he Motzui from the truth of his presence. Nimtzuk Kol Nivroim, everything came to be. That is prior to Chochmah, prior to investigation. The answer is because we are real. Our neshamas are real. And this is what feeds us that information. This reality comes from something very real. It is not something that developed on its own from the worldly arena, from the worldly experience. Where did I get that sense of reality? And that immediately relates to the first being, to the real reality that from which he comes, which brought him into the existence. This is going back, take it a little bit down. We always repeat what the Gemara says, Chocham, Pichach. He says, Anon Nosiv Malko, I choose the king. So we always point out, what is this choice of the king? Is that a sense of benefit? Of it makes sense? It doesn't make any sense. He's not going to get anything from the king. No matter what your occupation is, the king is not going to give you a job. The king is not going to give you a license to open a store. There's nothing to do at all. What's our non-nosiv malka? because he is a pikach. We explained the other day, a pikach means that his thought is open. Pikach means open. Not, the wisdom comes from his openness. What is open to? It's open to his nefesh. It's open to his rotz. He lives a real life. And therefore he goes to the reality. Therefore, the Rebbe says, since that the creation that we are dealing with, the Malachim, they have seichel, they have moichin umidas. These are real things. Where do they get these ideas? Where do they know? He says later on, I didn't get to that yet. They actually understand the lakus. How? They understand the lakus from their own reality, because they are real, to the sense that there is a reality. And they relate right away to the reality of existence. So therefore, this union between Chochmah and Bina, you're saying it's a Ha'ora Levad, and it's on, and it's not it, but it is real, it creates seichel. Where is the, now that we have identified this, where is the union that this is the short, so to speak, this is only zivug ruchi, it's not a real creation? What's not real about this creation? Now we have an interruption for reflection. Okay. Call to.
That's what we used to call.